Hello, everybody, and welcome to another segment of GIC TV Live. We have a very special interview today with author and philosopher James Olson. For those of you that don't know about his work, he is known as, for lack of a better term, he's an integral philosopher. He has won 5 National Book Awards. He explores how distortions and even destructive polarizations can occur in politics, culture, and our relationships when one brain hemisphere is dominated by the other. James is going to talk to us a little bit about all of the issues involved and that each of us must learn to consciously integrate the contrasting views of the world provided by each brain hemisphere. I'm very, very happy and very lucky to have James join us today. James will be joining us via Skype audio this afternoon. So let's welcome James Olson. Hello, James. How are you today? James, are you muted?
Hello, can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. How are you? Can you hear me, James? James, can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Sorry about that. Welcome to the show. How are you doing this afternoon for you? Is it?
Yes, it's 1 o'clock, just after one.
Okay, great. I'd like to welcome you to the GIC TV webcast here. We have had you on the show before, and we really enjoyed our discussion. And of course, the subject matter of your book is very exciting for those of us in the consciousness movement and in activism, for that matter. Um, so let's start with. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? What got you interested in philosophy, integral philosophy, and the left brain, right brain subject matter?
Well, I got really interested in the integral process and left-right brain studies after I attended a workshop one weekend. It was hosted by a neuroscientist from the University of Texas, and we were mapped, our brains were mapped by through when we answered a series of questions that had been prepared based on Ned Herman's 4 quadrant thinking brain model. And I had always known that, or always heard that the most important thing we could know is to know ourselves. And that was really foremost in my mind when I started looking at this, because I thought, what could be more important to know about ourselves than the brain? Because all of the decisions we make, even the decisions about what to believe, are based upon how we process information. So I got really interested in mind management, because I mean, we're talking about left and right brain here a lot today probably, but really our focus is mind management, how the brain affects the mind, because we are spirits, and we are spirits with a body, and we have this mind, which is a connective interface between us and the brain. And so when I discovered this, and it really changed the focus of my work and made me really interested in this, because even in terms of mind management, it all starts with the fact that the information we receive to mind is being split up into 2 unique streams of information that are so radically different that at times they can seem to be opposites, but they're really complements.
I can see how that would be, and I can't help but wonder if you could please explain to all of our viewers out there and our listeners. Can you tell us a little bit? Let's start off, since we're going to be talking about the different aspects of the brain. Can you start off by describing the characteristics of the left brain versus the right brain to give everybody a handle on our discussion today?
Sure, they're opposites in many respects. For example, the left brain is analytical. We've known that for a long time. And what analysis does is take things apart. Um, so the left brain disassembles things in order to try to see what's inside and what makes it tick. The right brain assembles things. It assembles parts into wholes, and wholes into greater wholes. It's a popular term is holon, which expresses the fact that every whole is also a part of something, and every part is a whole into itself. So there's this aspect going on. So they're opposites in that respect. And so another way that the left brain and the right brain are have a different orientation is the left brain is interested in our individual self, in individual protection, individual rights. And the right brain is interested in our collective welfare and collective, and it sees the big picture. For example, the right brain sees the big picture and the left brain sees the details. So that's another, fundamental difference between the two. And uh, so one's exclusive, the left brain's exclusive, um, and the right brain is inclusive. The left brain is a serial processor, and the right brain is a parallel processor. Because, and we see this in the fact of intuition, which comes to us from the right brain in a flash, much as the way a parallel processor works. And the left brain develops its understanding sequentially. It looks at the parts one at a time to understand the parts well. So the two brains have these are examples of some. I could go on in the book. There's a long list of the differences between the two, but that's the basic difference. One sees the big picture, one sees the details, one takes things apart, and the other assembles, unifies. An example of when I say taking things apart, it separates units of reality. So if you have a problem with something, you can just catch those people and put them in prison, and that separates them from your problem. Killing is a act of separation. So.
Okay, I see. Now, let me ask you, is it fair to say that in some of the metaphysical studies that I've done in the past and whatnot, to simplify, I was told to look at it as one is linear logical and the other is more intuitive cyclical?
That's right.
Okay. And which
The
is which? The left is the linear logical?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. That's the brain that's common in most males, and that tends to be their strength. And I hadn't brought up the term brain dominance, but that's something probably we need to at least mention.
Yeah.
That we have these two brain hemispheres, but one or the other tends to dominate in an individual. And in most men, the left brain dominates their thinking. In most women, it's the right brain. But there are a lot of factors that can alter this and kind of disguise it. And one of the most common is that women, although they tend to be right brain dominant, are educated in a left brain culture, in social institutions, learning institutions that are set up by men and reflect male ways of perceiving reality. And so we're teaching women to think like men. And so you see that in the act, women, it can be difficult to tell whether a woman, how much of her behavior is a result of cultural effects or how much is a result of her brain. But that's something she can see, and she's the one that needs to know. So we all understand ourselves better than anyone else, but we just need the tools to help us to understand ourselves. And to me, the first tool we need to understand is the brain through which all of our information passes up to mind and to spirit, where we as spirit have to make a decision.
You know, and that's a great intro to my next question. I wanted to ask you. Um, First of all, is it fair to say, and I don't know how much of your book, the Left Brain, Right Brain, A Whole Brain Path to Peace, covers this, but is there something that you feel or that you've thought about or theorized as far as is the mind the whole both hemispheres working together?
Well, mind is a different energy system.
Hmm.
It's the mind is separate from the brain. The brain can be taken apart and looked at under a microscope. Mind can't.
Right.
And mind is everywhere. That's why two people, maybe two uh, identical twins can, or other people can communicate, halfway around the world or on opposite sides of the world because of this mind energy. Uh, and so the two hemispheres of the brain are interfaced, to use computer technology, are interfaced with the mind and connect somehow through electricity or whatever to mind. And so they're different, and yet they're working together as one as well.
So, is it fair to say that mind transcends the physical characteristics of the left brain and the right brain?
Yes, yes. In I think of mind as a ideas as kind of a mental building block, that there are parallels between the physical world, the mental world, and the spiritual world. There's a oneness that is revealed in the fact that parables and allegory are so powerful because there is this unity between. And so the mind and the brain work together, and in a sense there's a left mind and a right mind. Roger Sperry did some of the first split brain research back in the 70s. And in 1981, he won a Nobel Prize in medicine for his research into split brain behavior. And what he uh, discovered was that it seemed as if there were actually two minds. That the two, the I mean, let me put it differently. He said that each of the hemispheres had its own consciousness, and that reflects the connection between mind and brain. That because consciousness is probably more of the mind than it is the brain, although there's consciousness in everything. So and so so let me say that scientists have since discovered or concluded that uh, it's not quite that simple, that the two hemispheres have their own consciousness, that there are actually many areas of consciousness. And I think it's fair to say that each cell has its own consciousness. So uh, they've kind of backed away from embracing the language he used, but his concept is still accurate in that the two hemispheres have each see reality differently, and they process information. They process and react to what they see in different ways, and this information is given to spirit through the intermediary energy of mind. It's some way that mind is really an energy that allows spirit, which is eternal, to connect to our physical body, which is temporary. And so mind is this this communicative energy that not only allows us to communicate with each other, but allows intercommunication between the various organs of the body to inform us, spirit, of what's going on. Does that clarify it?
Yeah, it is clarified, and if anything, it brings me to want to go deeper a little bit in the sense that I can't help but think or feel what you're saying is when, especially when you say that there is the I guess what we're talking about here is energetic polarity or polarity characteristics of even on a cellular level. Um, so is that fair to say? Is there somewhat of a polarity in the consciousness even of ourselves?
Yeah, polarity seems to be everywhere. The left brain is a polar brain. It's dualistic and gives us a dualistic perspective. The right brain is nonpolar. And an interesting fact I discovered in writing this was that all molecules are of either a polar type or a nonpolar type. And water and things that dissolve in water are polar, and oil and things that dissolve in oil are nonpolar. And we all know there's this kind of a tension, uh, a resistance of water and oil to integrate. They can be integrated, but you have to shake them or process them in some way. They don't do it naturally. And as I see it, the same process is going on between polar ideas and nonpolar ideas. The ultimately there's usually a way that they can integrate, but especially from the polar left side, uh, which is competitive and wants to be in control, there's a resistance to integration. And yet this is what we are called on to do as humans, is to integrate this left brain perspective, this left brain dualistic perspective with a right brain holistic perspective in order uh, to come to a way of acting, a way of giving things in our lives meaning. I mean, we have to choose one of the two, or we have to integrate the two perspectives in some way, and we usually integrate them in some way.
Right.
But we can be really radical and ignore one perspective or the other, and that's kind of where we have gotten off track as a culture. We have gotten too far into separation, and people that are driven by the left brain are so polarized and so separated from right brain people that it's really difficult for right brain people to get through to left brain people, because left brain people are kind of in defensive mode, resisting uh, any attempts to bring them into greater balance.
Right. You know, it brings me, it reminds me of a scene from the movie Little Buddha, where the moment he discovers, well, I guess his path to enlightenment. I can't say it was really enlightenment, but he talks about. There was a scene. I think if everyone's seen the movie Little Buddha, it's Keanu Reeves, and he's on a boat or something, and he's hearing a violin player, and he's like, if the string is too loose, it will not play. If it is too tight, it'll break. It is the middle way that creates the music. And that's what I just got, or it just came to me from what you just said. Our culture has found or lost its way to the middle way, and creating that balance that you're just speaking
Absolutely. That's what, and that's why I wrote the book, to try to explain the right brain's holistic perspective to a very dualistic, competitive world.
of. Absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about the well, as well, we're talking about your book completely here because this is all the material in there. But let me ask you a little bit about the title, in the sense of you're talking about resolving conflict, and how 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 does understanding how these two hemispheres respond to each other, how does this help us to resolve conflict?
We essentially have two parts of a puzzle, and if you were given two parts of a physical puzzle, you would want to look at those parts, examine them, uh, and see how they fit together. That would be, probably your first thing you would do. And yet, with the mind, we somehow think that we don't need to do this. We integrate information based on what our teachers have taught us, what our culture has taught us, and we really have a conscious power to be in control of our mind and to make decisions according to logical, loving relationships, and we need to understand those our brain, in order the two parts of our brain, in order to put them together, and in order to understand uh, that there's much value to the collective good as there is to the individual, and not to get stuck in promoting or another. And the same with feeling. The right brain is our feeling brain, and we can get lost in our feelings and not think adequately, and that's important to a feeling person, because our thoughts often cause our feelings. So a right brain person may need to be more aware of some of his or her left brain qualities, and it's kind of like operating a smartphone or any other tool. In order to do so most efficiently and most easily, we need to understand which buttons to push, and when to push them, and sequences, and things like a few things like this. Just knowing a few things can make operating a cell phone or a smartphone very easy. But if you don't know, it can be very difficult. And it's same way with the brain. If we understand a few things about what the two brains see, and how they're different, and how they can also work together, when we understand these relationships. And that's really what we're doing when we understand. When I'm saying we need to understand both sides of the brain, we need to understand the relationship of the two sides. And once we do that, we're all smart enough to put the information they give us together. This is not really a complex thing that you have to learn. It's just understanding the two sides of your brain, what they see and what they do, and in that way, it becomes relatively easy to put their inputs together, to put the information together that they give us.
Right, right. And it's the first thing that comes to mind for me right now is I remember getting this training during my spiritual, my early spiritual life from spiritual teachers and whatnot, and how sad it is that we really don't see this in the public school system. Or, I mean, this is something that you would have to literally specialize in to get any information to understand the characteristics of left brain, right brain, living and thinking. And I just wonder, what are your thoughts in the sense of, how could we better bring the education of the brain to the public?
Well, that's what I think about full time.
Oh, good.
Yes. Because it is so important, and it's ironic that we spend so much time on so many things that are of less importance than the brain that processes all of those other things.
Right.
So, I mean, you just have. The first thing is to understand it yourself. If you're listening, read. Get a book, from the library, buy a book, or go to my website. You can read one chapter. It's a long chapter, and it's probably the best and most enlightening chapter in the book. And you can read that free on my website. You can also, there's a chart in there of left and right brain characteristics. It's a longer chart. And you can look at that chart and look at how everything on the right side works together as a whole, and how everything on the left side works together as a whole. And then notice that, that on the opposite sides, it's the one's competitive, for example, and one's cooperative. So one works alone, one works together. They always have this relationship. And if you understand this relationship in your mind, you can do like I do. You can hear an idea and know whether it comes from the left brain or comes from the right brain, and that can be important to know, because if you want to use your whole brain, you want to consult each brain. And so if the brain tells you two things, do you know whether that's the right brain telling you something, its view, and the left brain giving you its view, or is that just the left brain giving you two different views, which could also happen? So in order to kind of understand what's happening to you in this process of managing your mind and your brain and managing information, you need to know whether you need to be able to tell the difference between left brain information and right brain information. And you do that by understanding the left and right brain, what they see and do.
Very good, very good. And today is Valentine's Day. We're recording this here on Valentine's Day. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Does the idea of understanding our brains, do you feel that this can help men and women better understand each other?
Oh, absolutely. Because really the biggest difference between men and women is in the brain. Women are more often driven by their feeling brain, and so men need to understand what that means, and in order to understand that better, you look at all of you don't just look at feeling or that the women are interested in the collective or the cooperative. You look at the whole package. And once you understand how the right brain operates, then as a male, you understand how the female mind is basically its foundation. Now they're all women are different, just like all men are different, and for many reasons and in many ways. But because women are primarily guided by a right brain, they are united, and they share all of these characteristics of right brain thinking. So as a male, when you understand this, you naturally can understand women better and understand why they do what they do. And that's why I wrote the book.
Very good, very, very good. Let me take this a little bit further and even push the envelope a little bit. We're living in a day and age where we're now very aware of transgender people. We're very aware of the gay lesbians, and as the Native Americans call it, two-spirited people. What is your idea of how this it manifests itself physically? I have my own definitions. I've been called two-spirited. I sometimes think and act more like a woman, but I have very male attributes and very male tendencies. And there are other people where I can see the same thing, where they're in a female body, but they're very masculine and have very masculine tendencies. What is your idea of the two-spirit phenomenon, perhaps?
Well, first of all, sexuality is on a continuum. We talked about the two extremes, and I'll get to that, but you talked about the complexity of having male attributes and female attributes, and we all do. We all have these. In some people, they're more apparent than in others, and it's a very complex thing. And so it's often hard to even understand ourselves, let alone others. But as I see it, there are really two factors going on here. There's the mental energy and there is the physical energy. And the physical energy, I'm talking about our bodies and the nature of our sexual organs, the nature of our hormones that are coming into the body. That produces a sexual component. And then there's the mental component, which is really what we feel, and it's the component that gives us gender. And so there are two perspectives in mind. There's the left brain's dualistic perspective, which we'll call the masculine perspective because it's typical of males and it drives the typical male behavior. So so there's the masculine perspective and there's the feminine perspective. And we already said that most men have the masculine or the left brain perspective. But the key word here is most, because not all males are left brain dominant. Some males are right brain dominant. And again, there's this whole continuum. There's not just two types. But so they're extreme. There are males that are extremely masculine, and there are males that are moderately masculine, and there are males that are barely masculine, and all in between. So what happens is sometimes you get a masculine perspective in a feminine body, or a feminine perspective in a masculine body, and when that happens, the feminine perspective, whether it's in a male or a female, it's the same perspective. Right. And it develops into the same fundamental perceptions. Now, perception is something that's affected by cultural inputs and the what other people are trying to get us to do. But our own brain is telling us who we are and what we need to be. And so, to be really true to ourselves, we need to listen to our own inner voice. And that comes from these two brain hemispheres, and especially from the right brain, which is the intuitive brain, which is connected out to the universe. And so, but anyway, who we are, more than anything, it depends on which hemisphere is directing us. And so if you're a male and you have a feminine perspective, you're going to want the same things that any woman does, and that includes a male for a partner. Mm-hmm. And the feminine perspective is expressed in sacred terms of sacred geometry, is expressed through curved lines. Yeah. And in order to be complete, to make those curved lines, the right brain, it really includes the left brain, and the right brain perspective really includes the left brain perspective, and the right brain uses the linear elements to construct its round objects, and so the right brain is attracted to, in sexual terms, is attracted to linear forms such as the penis, mm-hmm. and to the straighter bodies of males. And again, it doesn't matter whether you have a male body or a female body. If you have that perspective, that's what you're attracted to. And if you have a male perspective, you're trying to complement yourself as well, and you want what you don't have, and that's the circular lines of. So you're, as a male, when you have a masculine perspective, you're attracted to circular lines, the circular lines of a female body, and it doesn't matter what your own body is; it's what your mind is telling you. Wow. It's what guides you.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense, and I could name 1,000 examples that I have seen in my own life and with the people that I know. What I'd like to do is ask you a little bit more, and let's continue the conversation. Thank you for that. I think that goes along well with our Valentine's Day theme here. Let me ask you a bit about how you associate the left brain with war and the right brain with peace. As a very active activist myself and a peace activist, I do feel that. I do sense that. I sense that I'm very, how shall I say? I'm not going to say I'm offended, but I'm more drawn to those who want peace, who want to live in harmony versus those that want to be aggressive, assertive, or violent. So, can you tell us why you yourself would associate the left brain with war and right with peace?
Sure. Well, primarily because the left brain is takes things apart. We've known that for a long time. We call it analytical. When we're talking about we disassemble, and when you disassemble things, you are removing part of their identity, and you change them when you split a whole up into parts. Um, so, and sometimes that's destructive. If you take a person apart, you've killed them. And so the left brain, its fundamental process is deconstructive, and sometimes that's destructive, and often it's destructive. And the process, so it's just this basic process guides us. Another reason I believe this is because I mentioned Roger Sperry winning the Nobel Prize for his discoveries about split brains, and uh, one of the things he found out for which he won the prize was that there's a conflict between these two hemispheres in terms of well, in every way, in a sense, at least from the left brain perspective, because they're so different. And and I mentioned the tension between the polar and the non-polar, which of these two brains are. So there's this conflict in trying to bring them together, and for part of this, to help you better understand in this conflict, the left brain is competitive, and it's in charge of our security. The left brain takes care of us. That's why it's selfish. And being selfish is good as long as it's used in balance, because we have to take care of ourselves first in order to to be alive, to take care of someone else. So that's the left brain's job. And so it's very control oriented, and it doesn't want to do what the right brain wants it to do. It doesn't understand right brain people. It doesn't understand the female point of view, and why cooperation is so important, because it loves its competitive, it loves its sports, and it probably thinks that, well, if women take over the world, we won't be allowed to do sports.
Right.
Or something like that. It gets these fears. The left brain's our fear brain. It's energized by fear, whereas the right brain is energized by love. And these two extremes are so, in every respect, are so different that there's actually the conflict between the position that the right brain would have us take and the position the left brain would have us take if we were to listen to only one or the other. And so, again, our job is to somehow bring these two sides into harmony, into integration. And that's getting rid of, and the way you do that is to get rid of the conflict, because peace is our natural birthright. Peace is everywhere, and you can find it, in a closet, or in a monastery or in a forest, or you find it in various places. And the reason we don't have it is because of all the conflict that comes into our lives in taking care of ourselves and managing ourselves and managing our information. And so we need to get rid of this conflict in order to get back to peace. And so the question is, how do we best resolve conflict? And I guess each person has to do that. But to me, the place to start is to be aware that it starts within the brain. It starts in the contrast of left brain ideas and right brain ideas. And there's a cultural right brain and a cultural left brain. And the cultural right brain is most made up mostly of Democrats and liberals and and other independents. And the cultural left brain is made up mostly of Republicans and people who in certain and many conservatives, because the left brain is our conservative brain. And so what we need is to understand one another better. We need to understand where the other is coming from and not demonize the other side. And that's kind of where our culture has.
I'm sorry about that. We accidentally lost James. Sorry about that, James. We lost you on Skype. I'm sorry. Continue with what you were saying about the not demonizing Republicans or liberals.
Yes, Republicans are what they are because of what they were taught, because of the experiences they've had, because they tend to use their left brain. It tends to guide them. It's our security brain. That's why Republicans are so uh, why gun rights are so important to Republicans, because uh, they're dominated by the viewpoint given to us by the left brain, whose job is our security, and there's nothing wrong with that. We
Right.
need people to express that
Abs-
opinion. And the same thing on the right side of the argument. The right side has its own perspective on what's going on, and it sees certain things, and it's advocating for those things. And they, because it's kind of this war situation, we've taught that when somebody has a different opinion, and we tend to get into these arguments, but and get angry with one another. But we just need to understand that everybody's trying to do the best they can given what they know, and understand that there's people that are really confused on both sides
yeah.
of the argument, and it really muddies the argument. Conservatives aren't always conservative, and liberals aren't always liberal. We have a bunch of conservatives who think that the most important thing in the world is states' rights. That they want to be able to control things at the state level, where because they know the value of local control. But when an issue like uh, cannabis comes along, when states want to legalize cannabis, marijuana, all of a sudden they're not for state rights anymore. Okay,
Right. Right.
they back away from this conservative view because they don't want to accept this one example of states' rights, and 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 so both sides do this to some degree, and so they're working against their own self-interest in that respect, and they're not accept so anyway, but that's just an example of how conservatives aren't always conservative, and liberals aren't always liberal. And we need to, if we better understood what being a real conservative was, uh, we could be better conservatives than if we just listen to the news show and get our ideas of what's conservative from the media.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't help but want to ask you now, with the way that the world is, or I should say, the way that I see in my perspective, and we'll talk about perspective and perception in a moment. But what I've been seeing and what I've been uh, perceiving, I guess is the right word, is we're seeing a lot of people, especially those of us involved in spiritualism or consciousness, that there seems to be a certain a new polarity has arisen, at least in the United States, where not even liberal or Democrat anymore, or liberal or Republican, but it's corporate party versus third party. So we're seeing a new split there, and I'm wondering what is your take on that, and how does this play out in the left brain, right brain experience? Look at the Occupy movement, for example. They want nothing to do with Democrats or Republicans, and would like to see a new third party or a fourth or fifth party step up. And is there room for that in our country, the United States? And how does that play into the left-right paradigm?
Well, my thought is that our political systems are so powerful and so entrenched that it's going to be difficult to change them. So it's going to take some black swan event or some really powerful event to change them. But I think probably some of the splinter groups are thinking that, seeing the same thing, that they'll never change, and believe that the only solution to our problems is to develop a third party, because uh, and people, and get a majority there, and work from maybe a centrist party of some sort. And I think that's a good possibility.
Yeah.
Um, Buckminster Fuller said, when a system was uh, unworkable, you really needed to build a new system, and I think that's what's happening. I think
Yeah.
globally our systems are breaking down because the powers that be uh, just absolutely will not relinquish control or allow substantial changes, and that the only way that we're going to change our world is to have those systems break down.
Yes, I don't know whether it's unfortunate or fortunate, but I do see, and I'm very lucky to be a part of well, I guess being one of the people that are trying to create the new path, and really am very happy to see that so many people are I guess, treading new ground is the word I'm trying to use. And I can't help but wonder, and I guess this is a personal question, when we're treading new ground, and I'm using an analogy here, but when we're treading new ground, like developing a centrist party, or even developing a new business model, or developing a new system outside of the current, status quo, is that really our left brain or right brain, or a little bit of both?
Well, the right brain is the systems brain, and the left brain, because it integrates things. A system is an integration of elements. And so the left brain gives us the individual elements of the system, and the right brain integrates these elements into a process that accomplishes some goal. And so we're always, in most cases, we're always using both sides of the brain. And so the systems does use, in order to do systems planning, we do need to use both sides of the brain. And the right brain, being holistic, really is the part of us that unifies the left brain's information. So they're always working in team. I mean, we've talked about them a lot, of the differences between the two, but there is a natural teamwork that characterizes the two hemispheres.
That's a really good thing to hear. If anything, I feel that for me, I find that those trendsetters or path creators are going to be a great example of the unification that you talk about, of unifying the left and the right brain hemispheres. Um, We have about 8 minutes left, but I really wanted to touch on a common misnomer of the differences between perspective and perception. A lot of us in the consciousness or spiritual activist movement sometimes mix the two up, and I feel that this is an integral part of understanding of how our brain works. So, could you share with us the differences between perception and perspective?
Yes, perspective is what we see. You start with a physical perspective. You know, depending upon where you are, you see different things, and you can just be on one side of something and see nothing of the other side. And perception is that body of, is that comes to us that we create based on the meaning. Perception is what we make of what we see, what it means to us, and it's uh, perspective is very simple and can be described simply, but perception is very complex. It we into our perception of our perspective, we take all of our education and experience and apply it to what we've seen. So uh, again, perspective is very simple and can be and it, oh perspective is in the moment. Uh,
Uh huh.
Perception, we use the word perception to describe perspective that that we have had, but it's really after the moment it becomes perception because once we've seen it and it comes into the mind and we've processed it, we've altered it according to what we want to see and how we want to see it and what we've been able to see according to how well our mind perceives or our eyes perceive. So perspective again is very simple and perception is very complex.
I see. I see. Okay. Thank you for that. That's very very helpful, and I hope that clarifies well the definitions for many of us who use those terms often. Uh, one.
And we have it. The left brain has a dualistic perspective, and the right brain has a holistic perspective. And so, from the left brain, if we could split them and just take the left brain perspective, we would develop a left brain based perception. And the same thing with the right. If we saw only the right brain's perspective, we would develop the perception that's characteristic of right brain people whose perception is based on the right brain.
Ah. Okay. Very good. Very good. Let me ask you, and I think we have time for one or two more questions. Let me ask you about the fact that you draw heavily from something that you refer to as modern revelation. What is modern revelation?
Well, I believe that God has never stopped communicating with his children, his her children. Uh, People have been receiving messages in various ways, channeled messages, visions from God throughout the centuries, and some of these have been given the church's stamp of authority and made it into the canon of the Bible. But in some cases, God, we don't when we don't can't agree on whether it's from God or not. We tend not to accept it. So, but there are books such as A Course in Miracles that are widely accepted. Uh, Examples of channeling, and the Urantia books, another Course in Conversations with God's that series. These are books that are widely considered as modern revelation. God speaking to man and put in book form, like the Bible or other holy books.
I see, and I couldn't agree more. I feel that we are definitely at a time where many people seem to be receiving, well, like you said, modern revelation. And this might be a really far out question, and I don't. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. But when we are speaking or aligning with our source or having that divine connection, is that a left brain, a right brain, or is that coming strictly through mind? Or if that's even a question. But what's your
Well,
take?
no, it's a good question. I would say it comes from the right brain because the right brain is I look at the left brain as our ego brain, and the right brain is our God brain, and the right brain is gets fed by intuition, and that's instantaneously, as
Yeah,
you would expect. That's a very efficient the sort of communication you would expect to come from the angelic realm. But really, the right brain sees the big picture and it communicates with everybody. And the left brain is really focused on our Earth experience. So it's definitely a right brain experience, but that's not to say the left brain isn't involved. And I'm not sure how much, but the left brain does help us to understand the details
right, right, right.
sometimes.
Next week we're going to be having a show here at the same time called The Divine Brain with Miriam Delicado. We're going to be speaking about these particular subjects, but I can't help but wonder what your take is and what your opinion is on this particular topic. When I was having my own modern revelation, the voices, for lack of a better term, or the message was that this will never be interpreted correctly using language. And then, of course, my brain tried to interpret it and use words to express it. I can't help but wonder what is your feeling on that phenomenon where we hear so much that when people have these divine moments that there are just no words to describe them. But is there a way to unify that?
Well, I don't know if we're trying to write down something that we don't have words for. We can't really unify that, but it sounds like you get an intuition, a flash of intuition, an insight, a message through your right brain, and then you go over into your left brain to try to write it down, to put it into language,
Right,
and write it down. And I have the same thing happen to me. In the writing of the Whole Brain Path to Peace, have these flashes of insight and found very difficult to write it down with the exquisite beauty that in which
right.
it came to me. I don't
Yeah.
know. We
So
just
it's something that needs to be experienced, and we just do the best we can to communicate it, I guess.
exactly just try to understand it as well, and keep that flash of insight as long as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have to wrap it up. We're out of time, and I just want to show everybody the book cover. I am holding it up to the camera now. It is The Whole Brain Path to Peace. The subtitle is The Role of Left and Right Brain Dominance in the Polarization and Reunification of America. And if you could so quickly perhaps tell us what you meant by that.
Well, we're a culture that's very heavily dominated by the left brain male perspective and male uh, institutions. So we teach women to think like men, and uh, this and as I said before, the left brains are polar brains. So the left brain is being a polar brain. It's polarizing, and in order to get back to a balance, to unify, we need to bring right brain thinking back into at least to equality with left brain thinking. So that's the process, and to do that, we do it, I guess, one person at a time. Um, we get the idea. We all try to understand what's going on with our brain, and understand that the same thing is happening in the cultural brain, and just through awareness, this will change.
Yes, it will absolutely. Forgive me, and I hope you don't mind. I would like to just keep you on for one more minute and ask you. Now that I have you on the line, I might as well take advantage of it. What is your concept and your feeling historically speaking, how we have seen our human culture start off as perhaps a matrifocal or how do we say it, agrarian or whatnot, and then the entrance of the patriarchy, and now we're starting to see a little bit of a divine feminine presence emerging. Are you seeing the same thing? And do you feel that maybe perhaps ages are cyclical with the left brain, right brain thing, or are we going to finally get it and unify now? I know it's a loaded question.
Yes,
Do you see the
we
perception of the
we
cycles at least?
we are. I believe that these astronomical cycles also have mental cycles and physical cycles. Uh, the harmony of the universe ensures that things are changing. Things are always changing, and this is now the age of Aquarius, and this is the time for women to rise, and that means the right brain perspective, and that means getting in touch with our right brain. It's all part of the great change, and I know a lot of people that are working on this in various ways from various perspectives, all trying to help bring the divine feminine into greater prominence.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you for taking the time to answer that so honestly. And again, let me just remind everybody it is the Whole Brain Path to Peace, and we've been speaking with James Olson. James, can you tell us your website address, and is the book available in all the common bookstores?
Yes, the website is the thewholebrainpath.com, thewholebrainpath.com, and the book is available in many bookstores. You can get it online. It's available in a couple of different e-book forms, and there's a lot of good information at the website. Um, and again, you can read one of the best chapters and find that chart on my website under the book page.
Great, fantastic. Well, we thank you so much for joining us today, James, and taking time out to share your perspective and your wisdom with us. And I hope that everybody takes the opportunity to get a copy or at least take a look at the first chapter. There's lots of information in there that can really help us with what we're doing. I know we have a specific audience that watches us, and this is a part of our work to understand how our brain works, how important it is to know the characteristics of it. And please remember, next week also we'll be touching on the brain. We'll be discussing the divine brain with Miriam Delicato. Is there any last words of wisdom that you would like to leave us with, James? That
Well, the divine brain is the right brain, and I just want to say namaste to everyone, uh, and thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been a real pleasure. I always enjoy visiting with you, and I'm always here for you. Anytime I can be of service, I'll be back.
Oh yes, yes. We would love that. We would love that. I would love to talk about the divine brain with you as well. Anyway, we thank you for being available to our friends and to our members. And again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone. I want to wish you all a very, very happy Valentine's Day. And I just want to thank you for all of your support over the years. Thank you for supporting us today. And thank you for your future support here at the GIC. Just one very quick announcement. Next Tuesday, we are moving to Revolution Radio for our radio shows. For those of you that know, it is the home of Carrie Cassidy, Sean Jacob Morton, Dave Corso, Roxy Lopez, and we'll be joining basically all of our friends over there every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time. Our first guest is going to be Jeff Harvey, and what I would suggest is you come to the GIC.org and look at the event page. Jeff Harvey has a very interesting story to tell, and we're going to be talking about a lot of different things as well as healing, radionics, remote viewing, clinical detoxification, and just so much more. So I hope you'll join us for our debut show over at Revolution Radio and next week with Miriam Delicato. Thank you very much, James, and thank you, everyone. We love you very much. Bye bye now.
Collective, and it sees the big picture. For example, the right brain sees the big picture, and the left brain sees the details. So that's another, fundamental difference between the two. And uh, so one's exclusive. The left brain is exclusive, um, and the right brain is inclusive. The left brain is a serial processor, and the right brain is a parallel processor. Because and we see this in the fact of intuition, which comes to us from the right brain in a flash, much as the way a parallel processor works. And the left brain develops its understanding sequentially. It again it looks at the parts one at a time to understand the parts well. So the two brains have these are examples of some. I could go on in the book. There's a long list of the differences between the two, but that's the basic difference. One sees the big picture, one sees the details, one takes things apart, and the other assembles,
Right.
unifies. An example of when I say taking things apart, it separates units of reality. So if you have a problem with something, you can just catch those people and put them in prison, and that separates them from your problem. Killing is a act of separation. So.
Okay, I see. I see. Now, let me ask you: is it fair to say that in some of the metaphysical studies that I've done in the past and whatnot, uh, to simplify, I was told to look at it as one is linear. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another segment of GIC TV Live. We have a very special interview today with author and philosopher James Olson. For those of you that don't know about his work, he is known as, for lack of a better term, he's an integral philosopher. He has won 5 National Book Awards. He explores how distortions and even destructive polarizations can occur in politics, culture, and our relationships when one brain hemisphere is dominated by the other. James is going to talk to us a little bit about all of the issues involved and that each of us must learn to consciously integrate the contrasting views of the world provided by each brain hemisphere. I'm very, very happy and very lucky to have James join us today. James will be joining us via Skype audio this afternoon. So let's welcome James Olson. Hello, James. How are you today? James, are you muted?
Hello, can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. How are you? Can you hear me, James? James, can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay, sorry about that. Welcome to the show. How are you doing this afternoon for you, is it?
Yes, it's 1 o'clock, just after 1.
Okay, great. I'd like to welcome you to the GIC TV webcast here. We have had you on the show before, and we really enjoyed our discussion and, of course, the subject matter of your.
Be really interested in this because even in terms of mind management, it all starts with the fact that the information we receive to mind is being split up into 2 unique streams of information that are so radically different that at times they can seem to be opposites, but they're really complements.
I can see how that would be, and I can't help but wonder if you could please explain to all of our viewers out there and our listeners. Can you tell us a little bit? Let's start off since we're going to be talking about the different aspects of the brain. Can you start off by describing the characteristics of the left brain versus the right brain to give everybody a handle on our discussion today?
Sure. They're opposites in many respects. For example, the left brain is analytical. We've known that for a long time. And what analysis does is take things apart. Um, so the left brain disassembles things in order to try to see what's inside and what makes it tick. The right brain assembles things. It assembles parts into wholes and holes into greater holes. It's, a popular term is holon, which expresses the fact that every whole is also a part of something, and every part is a whole into itself. So there's this aspect going on. So they're opposites in that respect. And so another way the left brain and the right brain have a different orientation is the left brain is interested in our individual self, in individual protection, individual rights. And the right brain is interested in our collective welfare. And
Book is very exciting for those of us in the consciousness movement and in activism, for that matter. Um, so let's start with. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? What got you interested in philosophy, integral philosophy, and the left brain, right brain subject matter?
well, I got really interested in the integral process and left right brain studies after I attended a workshop one weekend. It was hosted by a neuroscientist from the University of Texas, and we were mapped, our brains were mapped by through when we answered a series of questions that had been prepared based on Ned Herman's four quadrant thinking brain model. And I had always known that, or always heard that the most important thing we could know is to know ourselves. And that was really foremost in my mind when I started looking at this, because I thought, what could be more important to know about ourselves than the brain? Because all of the decisions we make, even the decisions about what to believe, are based upon how we process information. So I got really interested in mind management, because I mean, we're talking about left and right brain here a lot today probably, but really our focus is mind management, how the brain affects the mind, because we are spirits, and we are spirits with a body, and we have this mind, which is a connective interface between us and the brain. And so when I discovered this, and it really changed the focus of my work and made.
Logical, and the other is more intuitive, cyclical.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Uh,
And which one's
the
which? The left is the linear logical?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. That's the brain that's common in most males, and that tends to be their strength. And I hadn't brought up the term brain dominance, but that's something probably we need to at least mention,
Yeah.
that we have these two brain hemispheres, but one or the other tends to dominate in an individual. And in most men, the left brain dominates their thinking. In most women, it's the right brain. But there are a lot of factors that can alter this and kind of disguise it. And one of the most common is that uh, women, although they tend to be right brain dominant, are educated in a left brain culture, in social institutions, learning institutions that are set up by men and reflect male ways of perceiving reality. And so we're teaching women to think like men. And so you see that in the act, women, it can be difficult to tell whether a woman, how much of her behavior is a result of cultural effects or how much is a result of her brain. But that's something she can see, and she's the one that needs to know. So we all understand ourselves better than anyone else, but we just need the tools to help us to understand ourselves. And to me, the first tool we need to understand is the brain through which all of our information